All right, so here we are with the project at its current state, and you'll notice right away that I've done a couple things off camera. One you'll notice, obviously, and one's not so noticeable, but I want to take a moment to explain both of these things before we move forward, exactly how I did them. The first one being the leaves. So I want to explain how I did the leaves, and I also added a little bit of a bump, what's called a bump map, to our water, so we get a little bit of sort of ripply reflections. Now you don't really notice it much here. You'll definitely notice it when I go to rotate the camera a little bit, and I will show you that. But first, what I want to do is hide a lot of this stuff. So it's really important that you get used to, especially when you're dealing with a scene that's this complex and has this many things. So often I will go through and just hide everything that I don't need to look at the moment while I'm working on other parts of the project. And that's just because with so many objects, with such a complex scene, Maya will tend to be kind of clunky and, not as responsive as I want it to be while I'm making edits. So typically I will only unhide them if I want to see what the entire picture looks like. But if I'm just sort of working on one specific little thing, then I'll hide everything else that's going to take up resources or that may make my computer obviously chug a little bit. So that's what I'll do first here is before we move forward. So mainly anything that we've done with mesh so far, I kind of want to hide. I don't necessarily need to hide like the shingles and the wood and the bricks and all that stuff, but the foliage for sure takes a toll on my system. So I want to hide that just so it makes Maya a little bit more responsive first. So we'll go through and just hide like our rocks. So I'm just going to go through and control H these things. I don't want to hide the ground. I don't know why I selected and hid that. But we want to hide, let's see, we'll hide the pavers. We'll hide our grass. And looks like I'm rendering by accident, so that's why it's a little clunky right now. So let me stop that render. So and then we have this, which is our rocks. We can hide those. More grass, and mainly the foliage. So what we're left with is a really simple scene that's just going to be really responsive for us whenever we need to do tests. So let me talk about the leaves really quick here and how I created these. So basically, if I unhide this piece of geometry here, we'll see a piece of geometry that I made basically the same way that I made the path here where our pavers are. Just by making the water a live surface and then just drawing some polygons on top of it. Now, this isn't the first iteration of this that I did. Originally, I did kind of like a blob that was just kind of like a big blob of leaves right here drifting around. And then I started to look at reference, right? It's so extremely important to look at reference. And looking at how leaves will kind of float away in water. And they kind of float away almost in like these little paths, right? So they don't really gather in a blob. Like, wind will kind of catch a few leaves and blow them away. So it's almost like there's these streams of leaves. So, again, it's really important to look at reference and don't just trust what's in your brain. So that's kind of what I tried to recreate there. So I just kind of maybe drew, I tried to make it look a little bit more like streams rather than a big blob of leaves. So I just drew out that geometry, and then I took one of the leaves off of our tree. So one of our trees here, I just grabbed a leaf and just copy and pasted it outside of that group. And I used that one leaf to distribute along this path here or along this piece of geometry for our little floating leaves there. And I think it turned out pretty good, if I do say so myself. But I do want to hide that again. And we don't necessarily need to hide the leaves. Our scene's acting really quick at the moment. And then the other thing I did is I added a little bit of a bump map, what's called a bump map, to the surface of our water. And let me show you the result of that first, because you couldn't really see it the way that it was. If I do a little render here, you can kind of see it a little bit, but it's much more visible if we rotate the camera to a different angle. So just give me a minute for yeah, there we go. So you can kind of see it a little bit there, but if I rotate my camera, right now we see that ripple happening much more in our water. So to do that, basically what I did was I selected our water, our standard surface, and I went down to geometry, and then I went to our bump map, and I clicked the little checkered pattern. So I'll just show you here real quick. I won't assign it to anisotropic tangents, but I just want to show you what I did. So I went to bump map, I clicked on the little checker box here, and I chose a fractal. Right. So then I clicked on a fractal, and now when you do that in the bump map section, it will automatically create a little bump 2D node for you. And I just lowered the bump depth really low. So something like 0.05, or, by default it's set to 1, which is generally very high. So a value of 0.1 or 0.05 is usually about as high as you want to go. But, use your discretion, kind of use it as you see fit. Now, originally when I had this all the way up to 1, just to show you really quick here, it was a very different result, right? It was very choppy, very strong bump map here, and a lot of our reflections are getting lost. Now, that may be the result that you're looking for, and that's fine. But I kind of liked a lower value. So this looks like very churny water, like it's a flowing river or something. And I wanted it to look a little bit more quiet and still. So a value of something like 0.1, right? Even this is a little bit more ripply than I possibly want it. So I went with 0.05. I might actually go in meet that in the middle there and do something like 0.075. But that's something I may tweak a little bit more as we go. But you'll see it here on different angles, but in some other angles you may not necessarily see it, as we begin to tilt the camera upwards. You don't really see it so much just because we're not seeing a ton of reflections here. But I will have at some point a boat floating in the water and maybe some lights over here. So I do think that's a really important thing to have. So moving forward from here, what I want to address is the flatness of the bottom of our sort of lake bed or river bed there. It's a very flat color. And I have an idea of what I want to do for this. One of the things I'm going to do is add, maybe some little debris pieces of debris to the bottom of it. But another thing I want to try is to add like sand ripples in the water. And just to show you what I'm talking about here, here's a little example. If I can bring that over there. So something like this. So I want like some ripples in the sand. So that's how I want to sort of address the flatness of our riverbed there. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to show you guys how we do that. Now this does get in a little bit of what would be considered texturing or shading. But this is the most we're going to get into any sort of texturing, meaning you're adding like a texture or like an image map, or it's not just a solid color. Basically, we're giving it some variation in color. So we're not going to dive into it too deeply, but this will get into it a little bit for sure. So the first thing I want to do is add a new material to our little lake bed here. So I'm going to come down here and select this and just right click and assign favorite, standard surface. And I'm not even going to bother with any of this stuff right away. I may drop or raise the roughness a little bit. And then otherwise, the only thing I'm really going to mess with here is the color. So what I want to do is go to the color. And I want to add a node. So I'm clicking that little checker box right there. And I want to add a ramp node. And you want to make sure that this is a 2D ramp. So we can click on 2D textures under Maya and click ramp. And now what this will do is basically give us a gradient, right? So as I begin to adjust this gradient, we'll see that we can alter this a little bit. Now we have different types of gradients here. So it's currently set to a vertical ramp or V ramp. We can change it to a horizontal ramp or U ramp. But what I want is a circular ramp. So I can sort of change how this circle is. Now, obviously, it's a little bit off center. So we are going to dive into UVs a tad. And I don't want to get too much into UVs. And I'm just kind of doing this to where I can see it a little bit better. But UVs are basically how you would map an image to an object. There you can actually see with that reflection, you can see the bump map on the water there, which is nice. But anyway, what I want to do here with UVs, and you're going to get to your UVs we'll select our little island there. And I think I may actually even lower this a tad. So we'll select our little island there. And then I'm going to go to, I have it here in my Mega Shelf, my UV editor, but you can also find it in Poly Modeling. Sorry, not Poly Modeling. That's going to be, where is that going to be? UV Editing. There we go. So I'm going to go to UV Editing and click this guy right here, which is my UV Texture Editor. And again, I don't want to get into UVs too much in these lessons because it's kind of a whole thing by itself. But all I really want to do here is center this circle with my UVs. So I'm going to right click, go to UVs. I'm going to select this whole object here, and I'm just going to move it around. Move it down like that and over here like that until I have that circle kind of centered around my little island. Right? Something like that. Now that's all I'm going to do with the UVs. I just wanted to get that circle centered, and this is the easiest way to do it. You just jump into UVs and kind of move those UVs around. If you do want to kind of get an idea of what UVs are, I have lots of lectures covering UVs and things like textile density and things like that. So if you're curious about more dealing with UVs and texturing, I have lots of videos on that subject. But now what we're going to do is we'll go back into that material. So I'm going to right click this in object mode and then right click material attributes. And I'm going to go to my color here where my ramp is. And now I want two colors here. I want sort of like a darker sand color. So it's going to be like a dark brownish, maybe something like that. I don't want to go too dark. This should be fairly subtle. And then I want a lighter, a tan color. So what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to click this swatch and I'm just going to choose that same brown color, but then I'm going to lighten it up quite a bit. Okay, something like that. And, you know, we can adjust these. We kind of want to adjust these now. Otherwise, we can still adjust them later, but it's kind of a lot to adjust them over and over again. So I'm going to do something like that. All right, so now we have our two colors. Basically, what we're going to be doing here is creating that ripple effect in colors. So I want to have a bunch of ripples. So I'm going to click in here a bunch of times, and that's going to give me a bunch of little dark brown ticks. And I'm going to click in here a bunch of times, which will give me a bunch of little light brown or light tan ticks. So what I want to do here is I want to I'm going to take one of these guys and I'm just going to bring it in until I'm kind of like right in that right spot right there. So somewhere right around there like that. So what I'm trying to do here is get this ripple effect. Now, if you click this guy right here, this will bring up a much bigger sort of window for you to work on your gradient. And basically what I want to do is have two of these really close together like this. And then the next one is going to be just slightly further apart. Right? So we have a really sharp fall off here and then a slow fall off here. So maybe and then I'm just going to repeat that over and over. And it's going to start to look a little bit like the Looney Tunes logo, right? Where it's just a bunch of circles. But here's where the magic happens. Right? So you're going to start to get something like this. And then down here in our ramp, we have this noise attribute. So I'm going to start increasing that noise. And I also want to increase the noise frequency. So I want to bump that up so we get like lots of ripples. And we can bump this up above 1. So something like 2, that's probably a bit much, and we're getting some weird stuff happening in there. So you need to find sort of just like a healthy balance between your noise and your noise frequency. Right? And we could also always rotate it. Like if I don't like how sort of simple it's looking right there, we can also rotate it. So I'll show you how to do that as well. But let's go ahead and just put a bunch of these ripples in here. And we can also make them go a little bit further apart, the sort of further down and further down the river we go, so to speak. So it's sort of like they're fading a little bit as they go down. Right, I want these two really close together, so you can kind of see it here, right? So it looks like it's kind of ramping up and then going down really, really sharp. Right, so we get this really cool effect, and this should look fairly neat when we render it. So we can just do a little test here. Let me close this guy and see what that looks like when we do a little render. Looks pretty cool. It is a little bright. I think I may want to go in and darken it up a little bit. But that's definitely kind of the effect that I'm going for there. And you'll notice that we do have a slightly different result here than we have here. So it might be a good idea to sort of tweak your results in the render window a little bit as you move forward, because I do want it to look a little bit more ripply. And sometimes you may actually want to just completely stop the render. Right? And then maybe redo it. So yeah, completely different result here. So just be mindful of that. You may want to adjust it. Now, if I want to rotate this a little bit, what I can do is come over here to this Place 2D Texture node, and then I have a Rotate UV option here, or Rotate Frame, but we're just going to use Rotate UV. And I'm going to rotate it. Until I get something that I'm kind of happy with here. And it is a bit odd that we're getting pretty much a wildly different result here than what's in our viewport. Let's try rotate frame. Yeah, so I think rotate frame's actually rotating it a tad more. So, and then I'm noticing that it's kind of backwards from the way that I want it to. Like it looks like it's sort of shelling up in this direction, and I kind of want it to go the other direction. So that means I need to edit my little waves a little bit, which is fine because I want to darken them up a little bit anyway. So I'll just bring this up, and instead what I'm going to do for each one of these, for this first one, I'll just make this one a little bit darker. And then what I can do is just flip this one over, right? So I get that reverse effect, and then I can just click that same color that I've already added there. right? And then maybe, let's see, I think maybe I'll bring these closer together and maybe make a few more. And it's not a really big deal if, say, it's easy to get this brown color now, right? Because all I have to do is like click over here or over here, and I have another little brown swatch. You can get rid of them with the X there. But then if I want to get this one, I can just kind of put this on the other side and then click in here a couple times. I'll click in here a couple times. Right, and then we'll take a look at what that looks like when we render it. So that looks a little bit better. It's a little bit more subtle. And I think once we get some other things happening in our scene here, it will sort of just sell it a little bit more. And now we could take this a step further here, which I think I might do, and add in an even lighter color. So I'll take this brown here and I will make it even lighter, something like that. And I'll make quite a few of those in there. And then I'm just going to place that right in between the two. And then we'll get like a nice little edge highlight. Let me turn my render off there. We can make this bigger too. So you can make this as big as you want it to be. So yeah, I'm just going to throw this in between each one of those, and then we'll get like a nice little edge highlight that will add just a touch more contrast. I don't know why this closes whenever we hit that, but again, if I want to add more of these, I can just click that, and I should have that color saved in here. And then we can check out what that looks like. So yeah, I may tweak that a little bit. I don't know if I have the placement quite right where I want it to be with this. Let's see if we just move it. I think it might just be a little too bright color-wise. So we could just darken it a tad. Still want it to be brighter than what we have, or brighter than what's already there, but it doesn't have to be quite as bright. And I don't think it's so bad if they're each a slightly different color either, just having a little bit of variation. in them is always a good thing. A little bit of human touch to it, which is always pretty crucial if you want something to just look like a very high quality piece of work. The human touch is always very important. So yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Let me really quickly just turn my rocks and everything back on so we can get an idea of what that's going to look like with everything in the scene. So we'll just go through and let's make sure our render's not going. And I'm just going to unhide. And then the foliage here, that's the big one. That's the one that's going to make our system chug. Right, and do a render of that, see what that looks like. Now, once again, I'll probably also add in some little bits of debris to our scene. But I actually really like that. I really like the result. There. Now I may make the water slightly darker. I think it's pretty bright the way it is. And I'm also going to go ahead and let me just stop our render here. I'm also going to go ahead and apply that same material to this this piece down here, and that's going to be the last material that we made, standard surface 19, and I will go ahead and name that material as well. I'm going to name this sand SS. And I'm not too worried about the pattern on this part because it's so deep down. We're not going to notice. It's not going to be super visible. We can go ahead and check it here. But yeah, it's a little bit more visible back there now with that sand, but it's not super visible. And we can actually see those ripples kind of way back there, which is nice. And then the only other thing I might do here is I increase the depth of our water quite a bit. And now this depth, this isn't like how deep the water is. This is how deep the light penetrates into the water. So the higher value this depth level is, the more transparent your water is basically going to be. This was originally at 100 and I cranked it up to 300. I might put it back down to 200 just for now. But you could see if I crank this all the way up to like 1,000, right, we're going to see a lot more of that sand down there. And that kind of looks cool in itself too, right? That may be the look that you're going for. And in fact, I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, I kind of like that, so feel free to experiment. But I think it is a bit much. I think 1,000 is a bit much. Maybe 500. Yeah, I don't know. Even though I was going to decrease 300, I think 300 might be the sweet spot, or something like 250 for me. But who knows? I could change it again. And then we could do a low angle here. Where we get our leaves drifting off in the background there. And we get that blurry reflection on the water. And we can sort of see our ripples in the sand down there. So it's turning out to be really good. I really like the results of this so far. The sort of finishing touches I think I'm going to do here on camera is probably just the lily pads. I do want to throw a little boat in there. I'll do lily pads and maybe just some other little tiny bits of debris floating around on top of the water. And a light, maybe a light on the dock. And I kind of had the idea in my head about like little maybe glowing fish swimming around here in this corner or just across the bottom. But I'm not sure yet. That will be some experimentation that I do. But I'm happy with the results so far. This is looking good. I really do like the ripples in the sand down there. I may even bring that ramp a little bit closer together so we can see more of those build up. But yeah, that's where we're at so far. Looking good. Almost there. We're getting close to finishing this up. And I'll see you guys in the next video.